All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We are at the 6th and final meeting for calendar year 24 of the Cybersecurity Advisory Council. We have more of a working agenda today. So we have our review of the last meeting, any corrections or notes, comments. Characterized as administration, but because this is the last meeting, we'd only agreed to through calendar year 24 for a meeting schedule. So we need to establish that before we leave today, what we can expect for calendar year 25. I circulated out the first draft of the strategic plan and annual report. So hopefully we'll do a first review of those. I anticipate we will have a January meeting. And so whatever we have for comments today, we will circle back around and do a final review prior to submission to the legislature at a January meeting. And then any open discussion or other items that come up. No one reached out with any additional agenda items, so that's what we're going with for today. Any questions, comments, or anybody want to add anything before we move on? Okay. I apologize, a little bit of miscommunication amongst ourselves within ADS since the last meeting. So the video and the recap weren't posted until a week and a half or so ago. But the website is current with those. So if there was any comments about the recap, questions, or any items that people want to address or correct, bring them up now in regards to the last meeting. Can't correct the video, so that's one nice thing. All right, hearing none, I'm going to assume that summarize.tech/ an AI product did a good job summarizing the meeting. Administrative stuff. Like I said, we only have a schedule through 2024. I'd like to get this so I can get placeholders in folks' calendar and get the website to reflect, since we are governed by open meeting laws. So anyone in the public can attend. This is kind of formal business, so I'll need, folks to either put forth something as a motion. We can then discuss, to get it started, I was like, the current frequency, day of the week, time, does our current pattern work for folks? Is that a good place to start? And let's go from there.
Subject to any concerns about the current time frame not working, I'd say that's probably the easiest way to go. But
so,
second.
Who was the second?
Eric Forand.
Oh, Eric. Okay, thank you. I saw also Erica come off mute, so that's why I was like, huh?
I just wasn't fast enough.
Thank you. All right, were you going to say the same thing? You were going to second it?
I was absolutely going to second it.
So we have a motion to continue the same, where we will meet on the third Wednesday of the odd month from 1:30 to 3. So we'll have 6 meetings in the month, or in the calendar year 25. Is that the kind of the correct way to interpret that motion?
yes, please don't make me restate it.
No, we have it down. So any discussion on that before we put it to a vote? In the room here, you good?
No. These are easy choices.
Yeah, it feels like it's been able to allow us to do our work, right? The frequency's been not overburdening, but enough that we're not slipping behind. So
the only thing I would ask is making sure that we've got the invite out on calendars early in advance. And that if we do have to cancel it, or change the time, that we also do that well in advance with communication.
yeah, last year when we or in January when we set this, that's why there's people missing. That's why JT was missing, is this was set back in, I think, February. So I will make sure to get that out, yes. Well, then I guess we'll call a vote. All those in favor of the motion of the odd months, third Wednesday, 1:30 to 3, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Excellent. The ayes have it. We will continue this pattern. So I think I anticipated this and projected out. Our next meeting would be then Wednesday, January 15th. Which would be the first one of 2025. So I will get that invitation out tomorrow. I will get all 6 out so that folks will have it on their calendar for the calendar year. And I will make sure that it reflects the current membership and not the previous membership. So, all right. While we're dealing with any kind of administration, meetings, any of that, is there any items related to that folks have? Now that we've got 6 meeting, our 6th meeting now, under 5 under our belt, things that people want to see changed and how I'm either organizing the meeting, agendas, anything like that, or is everyone also kind of comfortable with the formats of the meetings today?
I'm comfortable.
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Agreed.
I got thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Okay. I'll continue, but if you have ideas or suggestions, by all means, I may or may not be open to listening to them. But no, I will. All right. Thank you all. I think now we're ready to move on to review document that was circulated. Specifically, we're going to start with the strategic plan. So let me stop sharing. A moment. Start sharing that document. So I'm going to start right off the bat with a format question. When I reviewed the enabling legislation, it didn't call out for the strategic plan as being a separate document or report. It just said that we had to produce a strategic plan. So I kind of vacillated as I worked on this back and forth as to whether it should be standalone, and I decided to just embed it in this year's annual report. If we want, we can extract that, right, for reference and using as we move forward and develop the items we've identified in the strategic plan. But for submission to the legislature, I figured it would just be part of our annual report. Does anyone have any concerns with having it structured this way?
No.
Cool. I'm going to jump down and we're going to look at this. We'll start with the strategic plan. So, all right. And Erica, I don't know what happened. I reached out a couple of times. You were the only one that I wasn't able to get a one-on-one meeting with. So I apologize. For some reason, we just didn't sync up on that.
Nope, apologies on me, Sean. It just was a little bit of a crazy month, and
okay.
I didn't get back to you. My bad.
No, no worries, because believe it or not, the first email I sent to you went to your partner.vermont.gov. So I'm like, well, I know she's not going to see that. So I didn't know if I sent follow-ups to that account either. So understood. So everybody else, we got to sit down and after the last council meeting and individual meetings, we just had talk through different ideas that could be incorporated into the strategic plan, kind of like fleshing out the conversations from the last meeting so that I was as informed as possible of kind of like the collective thoughts of the group, so that the strategic plan would reflect that. So in each one of those, we went over also something that I had been working on kind of as a parallel track in my role here working with the CIO's office around developing this program of 3 tiers of offerings that we were calling crews. And that just once we kind of looked at the survey seemed to align very well to where most of our critical infrastructure operators who are at, right? That there are those that have some fairly well-developed and robust cybersecurity programs and awareness. There are those that are, in that journey, right? They know they want to do more, but maybe they're struggling because they don't have the resources, whether those are human, financial, or maybe access to contractors, whatever it is. And then there was definitely a portion that hasn't even started it, right? That they still, I think, equate cybersecurity to be similar to physical security, right? Where if you're in a remote rural area, you're not going to be a target, where we know that otherwise. So quickly on the overview, what I was able to gather from everyone and how I wrote it was that in the overview that we have, in essence, 3 levels of organizations, ones that haven't started, ones that are on the journey, and ones that have some sort of a mature program established, I think I said. I used kind of and explained it here in figure 1, right? So this was from the dashboard. And this is what I will need folks' input on. It is not sector specific. It's all the sectors. It doesn't show the questions. And I explain only like in generalities, the responses. So it feels like including this on a public document is not a risk. Does anyone see concern? And I just thought for it, like, showed the picture of kind of like the dynamics of how diverse we got responses to the survey without getting into any details. So I'm looking for thoughts on that first.
I mean, I like the idea that it's not sector specific, obviously, but on the other hand, it's not sector specific. So, I worry that people would look at this graphic and think that not enough is being done, across the board, and that more needs to be mandated across the board.
Yeah, see, I guess that's where, that's a very good point, Eric, right? And I've never sat on, I don't want to say it, the heavily regulated side of this equation, right? So I'm looking at it as like trying to sell folks that look at this, right? That we need to make sure we get the appropriate resources to help those that are in the orange migrate towards the blue, right? And those that are like on your side, right? You worry that, okay, is now somebody else going to come down with yet another mandate for us to have to meet? That's an interesting perspective and one that had not been entered my thoughts on this. So that's very good. What do others think? What do you think, Erica?
I agree with Eric.
Okay. Is there a better, do you think there's a better way to represent this? Or do you think this is not something that's not adding value to the strategic plan?
So I think it represents the data. I think the data, we've talked about this a couple of times. It's hard to understand what the intent of some of the answers would be. So yes, like I think that this is important. I think it gives us a result.
Eric, do you have ideas or anything on like how we can maybe convey the same message without the same risk?
I mean, maybe a pie chart, that at least that's a little broader, right? Whereas, when you look at this, you say, well, which one is which, right? But pie chart would be all the respondents, right? With 4 slices. Yeah. I don't know.
All right. Don't we make note of that?
I mean, because it's a first look. Obviously the majority is in that dark orange, and that's not positive, obviously.
Yep.
And while it'd still be the biggest piece of the pie if you use a pie chart, but I don't know. If you group everything together a little bit more.
But it's a snapshot as well, correct?
It is,
So
and it's a
some of the
subset.
segments- And some of the segments had a very small volume of responders representing that.
Yeah.
Industry.
That section, yeah. Person was up there, I'll have to remember that. So that's a good point. I'll see if I was drawn to this one, I don't know why, but I really like this for in the dashboarding effort, right? To try and like visualize the whole results in one way without disclosing anything. But I can see what your concerns are, and I'll take a look. This is why I thought we should have probably 2 reviews of this, so I can work over the course between now and the January meeting to come up with some alternatives that we can decide if something's better, and if not, then that we'd not even include it or something. So
Can I just make sure that we're clear on with what is the message we're trying to convey with this particular visual? Because there is a lot of data, there's a lot of really good data. And I just want to make sure that if we come back that we're looking to accomplish the same thing.
what for me, right? What I think it shows is the diversity of what we have for the maturity of our operators, right? And that we don't have any area where everybody's in the blue. We don't have any area where everybody's in the orange. We don't have any areas where there's not light blue and light orange, except for the ones that are the binary questions of yes or no. And so I don't know, right? To me, it just showed that it's kind of reflective of a very, very diverse maturity across all the critical infrastructure sectors. But maybe there's better ways to show that without. So.
Yeah, I think
I
I'm
thought-
gonna play off of, I've been sitting here really quietly trying to absorb it. I would play off of the 2 things. I agree with Eric that you look at those orange and you go, wow. And if that's what your focus is, that might draw concern away from the primary goal of the document, which is to lend towards the strategic plan. So going back to what I think it was Erica said, is this helping the goal of the document to get us to the strategic plan, or are we better off using some other type of graphic?
Mhm. Okay.
I do
What's that?
agree with you
Oh.
that it shows the drastic comparison. It's disappointing that there's so much orange, dark orange. So it's scary.
Yeah, well,
I think we expected it as well, though.
and so.
We expected it, but would that draw the reader to the conclusion that that's where the effort should be focused, is who answered those oranges? And I don't think that's what the strategic plan is doing, right?
Yeah, and to be fair, right, we see, Sean, we'll be right to you. See your hand up. The folks that I worked with, the data folks that helped build out these visualizations, lumped the I don't know responses with the no responses. And I think, right, to Eric's point, if I figure out a way to roll them all up in like a pie chart, and like I don't knows shows a separate piece of the equation, so they're not the dark orange. I don't know doesn't necessarily. We know that not everyone answered it because of they didn't actually truly know, but for other reasons, right? Because of what we inferred when we saw other questions that were semi-related. So maybe it's important that the graphic we have calls out or doesn't lump the knows and I don't knows together, right? But it shows the uninformed portion distinct, so that because if you take those out of the dark oranges, the actual no responses that they're not doing anything in that question gets quite a bit smaller in most. So
That'd be
yeah,
good.
I think I've got enough to work on now. I'll go back with the data folks to see how we can. I was originally thinking a scatter plot diagram, right? That just was more going to communicate the schizophrenic nature of the responses, right? It was just like everywhere, like it looked like a Rorschach, right? And it'd be like, see, we need to bring order to the chaos type thing. But I don't know if that's it. Sean.
So just a couple of questions. Are we concerned with the way it looks, that it looks bad? It doesn't show us a good picture. Are we concerned with the data that's there or the accuracy? Because the I don't knows is an accuracy issue. And we could put a caveat. So we do a lot of intelligence analysis. And what we'll do is we'll put the raw numbers up because interpreting that is difficult, deciding if someone did know or didn't know, but they hit the wrong box. But you can say that, out of this many responders, there was this many I don't knows, which are classified as like a negative. But my concern too is that we don't water this down. It doesn't look good on anybody involved in this because they're not prepared. As a general rule, this group of people is not prepared. So let's not water that down. That's exactly what this council is for, is to get these people prepared. So my concern is when we try to make it look a little less evil, we're kind of taking away the reason why we're here. And yeah, the public might panic. They're going to look at it and go, whoa, like there's a lot of people that don't know what's going on. But there are. I mean, we're in meetings with these people all the time and they don't. And that's why we're supposed to be here to advise them. So that's my one concern as we talk about this, that we're not trying to water down the graphic to make it easier to swallow. We're putting out the data that should be there, even if it's ugly.
Yep.
Very good point.
So
I appreciate
Sean, I agree with that. The we need to be able to share bad data, right? And so, we're currently not out of executive session. The answers and the questions that are associated with these scores aren't part of this. But the problem that my concern is that this looks bad, but the I don't knows aren't necessarily bad. For example, to use Sean's wording. And so is this a valid Gantt chart, whether we do it as a Rorschach or a pie chart or whatever? Where this fell, and sort of do some of the analysis ourselves and the interpretation rather than anonymizing the raw data.
Erica, I totally get what you're saying. One thing that we do this with threat reporting. So basically we put out to law enforcement and critical infrastructure what your threats are. And we do get that, I don't know, we actually got rid They just don't know. They could be saying, I don't know, because they're in absolute peril when it comes to cyber. So how are we to decide that? So I guess my
Yeah.
question is, can we look at this in Sean, if you want my team to look at it too, I mean, maybe we can take these numbers and pull the NA or the I don't knows out and put it in its own separate category.
I believe we have done that. So this is just a visualization that had rolled no and I don't know up, but we do have them separated. And I think that's what I'm really hearing, right? Is that we should still paint the picture that the data paints, but not lump I don't knows with the no's so that it portrays an I don't know as purely negative when it may not be, right? Because the I don't know might not have been because of ignorance. It might have been because the person that it landed in their inbox just wasn't intimate with that piece of the program at their organization.
Well, I want to go back to the questions that were asked, though. They're not in-depth questions, and we really struggled with this when putting together the survey, and we talked about it at this meeting. And based on who it went out to, these were very generic cyber questions that, and I don't know in that particular case with cybersecurity being a team sport, I don't know would be the equivalent of a no, or it would hold the same risk of no. And if somebody in an organization, based on who we were sending it out to, doesn't know, it's still a gap. It's a measured gap.
It is. I just think somehow distinguishing it, because an affirmative no feels a little bit stronger than an I don't know.
But I don't know is still a risk area because it is a
It is.
gap.
It is. And so,
Could
bear with me because I did some different ones. Oh, somebody really wanted
Sean had a comment.
Sean, go ahead.
I was just, ma'am, I don't know what your name is. Sorry, it comes up as ADS conference room. I was just going to say, I agree with you. Maybe putting those I don't knows in its own separate category to explain how many people just didn't know, which is another concern.
Yeah. And we do have it broken out based on the questions.
We do, right? And so I'm going to
And
draw
I
your attention, right?
apologize for those. I'm Denise Riley Hughes.
Right, I had done some screenshots of some of them, like one question that I thought was fairly maybe safe from each of the sections of the survey to include in the annual report, right? So this is one that's a perfect example, right? Where it says, do you assess the cybersecurity posture of third-party vendors before engaging their services? Well, no, at 22 versus 30 that yes, doesn't feel so bad, right? When you see the I don't know separated, but now all of a sudden you lump no and I don't know together, and that's 38. And that feels a lot more negative. When the reality is if this is like an IT director that's answering it, they may not know the practices, the contracting practices of the organization as intimately to be able to answer that, right? So the I don't know was an honest response. They didn't go seek to get information. So, that's I think showing the I don't knows not as rolling them up as purely negative, but as their own category will be important. So I've got some ideas. So if everyone's all right with it, I'll take this piece and I'll try to give an interim update so that the first time you don't see it will be the next meeting, right? So folks will have time to react to it. Maybe we can tweak this via email. So, but that's all very good. Thank you. Those are things that I had not necessarily been thinking about.
So Sean, not that I want to continue flogging, equines here, but if you could go back to that question where you had, do you have a cybersecurity, right? So I think it's important to sort of somehow make the statement that this I don't know with 16s and 22 no's and 30 yeses. This is across all sectors, right? So not that I want to like beat down on some of the other categories, but houses of worship, for example, you know, I'm less concerned that the church down the street, is not aware of their cybersecurity posture, and way more concerned that an electric utility might not be aware of their vendor's cybersecurity policy. So, I mean, the risk is different, right? The threat is different. And so I would kind of like to be able to call that out in the report to some extent, again, without necessarily calling out giant red flags for industries either.
Yeah, I think I just said that this represents all 16. I don't think I implied any kind of carve out. Okay. And I'm a visual person, right? So maybe it's just my hang up that I want to have some like graphics in here because black on white is, I'm afraid no one's going to look at it and kind of like be interested in what we're trying to advocate for. But maybe surely just in prose, rolling up, writing a summary of the survey in prose is better than trying to articulate the graphics, right? That I specifically list which sectors responded, right? Because we didn't get any response from, not all 16 sectors responded. Dams and a couple of others didn't. And just, which sectors responded, and then kind of like, what percentage was yes, in process, plan, no, or I don't know, or something like that in aggregate. And not even have graphics. I will work on giving everyone like 2 or 3 things to consider as an alternative for this, but I get the picture. Oh, I hate that. All right. Any other comments on? I think that was. We're getting in the overview here, where then lay out the idea of the strategic plan having 3 tiers of a program that has 3 tiers of services to match kind of the diversity of the organizations that we saw as a result of the survey. And then spoke to the number of organizations that will benefit. I used the example that there are 3,000 water, wastewater service. Service providers, in that we have this, we plan on using some sort of phased implementation because, well, we can't just have a free for all. It's got to be targeted somehow, some way, shape, or form in order to make sure it has impact. Any questions or feedback on those couple of paragraphs? Move right along. This is just the overview, so we will get into the details down below. And then this is where as we spoke, that first phase, kind of like the proof of concept, being one that's focused on the 14 hospitals in the state of Vermont and those critical infrastructure providers that support those hospitals, to kind of make sure that what we're proposing as a program will have the effects that we anticipate. Questions or comments before we move into the goals and objectives? All right, goals. Increase awareness, cybersecurity, improve operators' preparedness, just build and establish relationships so we have like a community of cyber ready organizations, develop a universal, I don't know what else to call it, incident response plan, and establish a program that promotes continuous improvement. Folks good with how I've stated those goals, things that they would like to see modified, changed, deleted, updated?
Sean, I think your intent with number 4 is just for it to be a template. Do you want to be clear in that statement? That is just a template, not a universal incident response plan that you're going to,
Yes.
Or is that not your intent?
No, it is, right? I mean, everybody's organization's different, right? So it's not going to be you pick up a generic IRP and it's going to work for you, but if you most of these organizations are so overwhelmed, they don't even think about who they're supposed to report to, right? And so we got thinking about, we said, well, that's the kind of stuff we could include in a Vermont-centric template, right? Is that what is Vermont law? Who do you have to contact, at the Attorney General's office? What are your obligations? What are your timeframes, right? We can summarize that stuff doesn't exist anywhere else, right? Kind of in a, almost like as an appendix or an addendum to the IRP, and save folks so that they have that if it happens. So thank you. Yes, it's meant to act as
I think that
be a template.
the terseness of the sentence makes it not clear what your objective is to provide information that's Vermont specific and assist organizations in development of their own incident response plan. Would want it to be seen as a directive to use a incident response plan.
Yeah. Should I,
Give you a recommend.
yeah, I can put that in there. Right, yeah, this is not meant to be heavy-handed, right? This is meant to be, we're just going to make your life easier. So if you grab this, you're already going to start out ahead of the game type thing, right? Incentivize people to do these things because we're going to make it easier because it's going to has some Vermont-centric stuff already as part of it. Okay. Good edits. Other thoughts? All right. Like I said, we're going to go through this twice, right? So this is first pass. I'll work on it, and then we'll get another crack at it on January 15th. Which lines nicely because I think somewhere around the total, I don't know when the budget address will be, but we won't submit this till after that. So it'll probably be at least the 3rd week of January. So that'll, timing wise, will be just great. Program objectives. These are numbers that I was I figured it felt like we had to have targets, right? At least out of the gate. And so these are what the targets are. I'm not wedded to these. These numbers can be up, down. It can be more generalized, but that, we try to get 20 organizations. Mr. Kaiser, I saw your hand pop up.
Is the intent to map each of the goals to the same number objective in the paragraph below? So you measure goal number 1 by fulfilling objective number 1.
Yes.
Since it's 5 and 5, it's easy to assume that. I just want to make sure that's what you were intending to say.
My intent was to provide for each goal a KPI to see that we were
Yep.
going to measure for that goal, right? So this was meant to be that kind of KPI. So
Yep.
the objectives or the targets, yes, there is a correlation, right? 20 for tier one, right?
So I question,
Right.
I guess, how 20 organizations completing tier one equals increased awareness for all all critical infrastructure operators and municipalities.
Oh, darn you. Yeah, we'll just get rid of all. Right, because you're right, because it's really not meant to target all, because those that have a program or a mature program, they're well aware of it, right? So we don't need to increase their awareness. We need to increase the awareness for those that are not necessarily doing anything in this space.
Not to wordsmith, but it is also targeted to Vermont, right? Vermont's critical infrastructure, municipalities.
Yeah.
Communities, right? But I wouldn't entirely remove all to make it specific. It is about Vermont.
Yeah, and my point is more
Yeah.
just to highlight the disconnect, not necessarily suggest the fix.
Yes.
Okay. So where do you want to see Vermont appear in here then?
Well, every time we talk about critical infrastructure operators, we are talking about Vermont and municipalities serving
Yeah.
Vermont or serving Vermonters. Because this isn't a national program that we're putting together.
True.
So
Okay.
I don't know if it needs to be called out. I think we make the assumption, but if we're putting something like this together,
Yeah, maybe I need to reword this to incorporate. Maybe I need to be specific in how the lead into it, and then I don't have to repeat it throughout or something. So, okay. And I'm gonna have to rework I see what you're saying, David, that I need to rework this to be more like, to speak to the more entry level, or to read like it's targeting the tier one. Okay.
For goal number 3, do you have a definition of what a cyber-ready organization is? That defined elsewhere in the document? I'm sorry, I only scanned through it before.
No, we have not defined that.
I think that's probably something we need to think about too then.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, my gut reaction is it's tier 2 or better, but that's my gut reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And sorry, I'm going to sit here and fake it until you tell me to knock it off.
No, this is what I need, right? I mean,
does the program objective in number 3 of 3 organizations participating equal the foundation for a Vermont community of cyber-ready organizations, or is that, how does that, I guess, how do those two relate? Does Vermont community equal 3 orgs participating?
Um, so, no, yes, kind of. So I will be up. The third tier, right, is the advanced, the information sharing collaboration, what we were originally working on calling the SOC constellation, right? And I don't have a corresponding goal for that tier 3, because the objective is really more of a match to tier 3.
Yep. Okay. I buy that.
So I don't really, the goal of item 3 in the goals section should be reworked to be more about tier 3 and not have anything, because that's really more like a, I don't know, a values statement. Because I
So
don't know if we'll be able to measure it, right? Because everybody that gets into this will start sharing information, and so I mean, the community should be organic as a result of being involved.
So maybe you say something in the program objective number 3 section as this is the first step towards building the tier 3 constellation concept. And initially, we're looking for 3 organizations that are participating in information sharing and collaboration.
Oh,
You can hang the long-term goal out there in a more subjective manner, but make the initial goal more objective.
yep. Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's totally fair to say we're still developing what the big picture end state looks like, but we know it's somewhere over there. And as we get closer, we'll define what the specific vector that we need to be on consists of.
So I'm putting it down as reworking to be more tier 3 without losing the community piece, right? So the kind of the longer aspirational, but then still keeping the objective as 3 for the time frame.
Mm-hmm.
Part of me's wondering if, I mean, we're working on this now, and calendar year 25 will have already started before we even submit this. And we know we've got a lot of, well, administrative work to do to even free up SLCGP money to even help with any of this. I'm wondering if it should be more fiscal year 26. That's probably a more reasonable window on this stuff.
I think all the folks working on the SLCGP stuff would appreciate that, but that's, me feathering my own, no, making it easier for myself.
No, it's just being a realist, right? It's like if we put it out there, we could be like, we're not in a position to start any of this work a month and 10 days from now. Right? I mean, we're still just like
Yep.
shaping what this should look like. And now we're gonna need months to try to like turn it into like the tactical, how do we get it done thing. So, okay. Anything else, Mr. Kaiser, on these 2 sections?
No, I think I'm done for the moment.
Thank you. Others that you've had the opportunity to listen to Mr. Kaiser and I banter back and forth on the edits. Anybody have issue with what we've kind of changed, tweaked, modified? Other suggestions?
not to be too picky, but 4 in the top list is different than 4 in the bottom list, so I'm still struggling with what's the intended wording. Um,
Well, they're pretty close now,
yeah, they're pretty close. But is there a
right?
reason why there's just not the same
Um,
objective?
maybe I need to restate that, right? Because we did add template up above to match, because I had template in the 4. Um, maybe I need to be a little bit more prescriptive as to what's going to be in the template in this one.
Yeah, I almost think the 4 you have down in the objective should be the 4 that you have up at top, and then be a little bit more prescriptive describing what is in that Vermont specific.
Yeah, that's a good point. We don't have anything that really measures it, right? And that's what
Right.
the others are trying to do is we're either going to hit these numbers or not. Okay. And I have something in mind, right? I mean, when we were talking to Champlain, we're using for those getting in started, the Cyber Readiness Institute's incident response plan, which is a very basic playbook. I could probably harvest from there the different sections that will inform this. Okay. Got that. Any other questions, comments? Hi,
The
Sean.
only thing I was going to, sorry, the only thing I
Go
was
ahead,
going to
Eric.
mention was that from a KPI perspective, you know, obviously it doesn't have to be done now, but by the time it's a finished document, we should define who's doing the work, right? It's going to be Champlain folks getting the 20 organizations to complete the tier 1 planning, then we should call that out rather than, you know, us
So-
doing that.
Our original document has that, and I stripped that all out because I was afraid to put in front of the legislature anything that was too prescriptive or called out any organizations, right? So this has been generalized so that we could pivot, right? So if all of a sudden, for some reason, we can't get Champlain to do it and Norwich ends up being able to fulfill that role, I was trying to leave this generalized. Because the other piece is, as I was talking about, there's a state and local cybersecurity grant program by which we want to utilize at the federal level to try and fund some of this. And I don't know if Mr. Kaiser knew this, but I learned for the first time today, we cannot issue grants to like selected entities. We have to do a competitive bid process. So what we've done with conversations with Champlain can't happen. So we're kind of at we're going to, in order to meet the requirements of that grant, we're going to have to do a competitive procurement anyway. So that's why I was trying to leave these open-ended. But I hear what you're saying, and I'm like, I'm trying to think if I have something down below.
I mean, and maybe this is pedantic and obvious, but if we don't know how much money we have and we don't know who's going to do the work, like, do we want to say 20?
I know, and
Uh,
that's yeah, right. That's the struggle, right? It's like and I was right. The engineer in me, right? You know, the numbers person wants to have targets, right? It's like if we don't have targets, how are we going to know whether or not we did anything worth a damn? Right? Did we accomplish anything or not? Right? If it was just open ended. But I know exactly what you're saying, right? If without a budget, without specific delivery details, is it reasonable to put targets out there? Because we have no idea if they're attainable or not. Right. And so, and I don't, for a strategic plan, I'm okay if maybe we pull that out. Mr. Kaiser.
Or maybe we put language in that basically says pending available funding, this is the branches and sequels or de-escalation or however you want to characterize the language, have a way to bring that down if the funding is less than expected.
Okay. Make a note on that. Yeah, I struggle. So, I mean, Eric, what are your thoughts? I mean, do we put a qualifier in there around the funding? And the reason I scrolled down is that I thought I had done this somewhere in here, right? And I talk about partnerships, right? Is going to be a critical piece, right? And I list out kind of the organization. I list out who are going to be the types of organizations, or specifically who are going to be working with, like with League of Cities and Towns, National Guard, Vermont Rural Water Association, Cyber Readiness Institute. But I didn't say Champlain, Norwich, or anything else. Should I, right? I call out that these will be the ones responsible for delivering tier 1 and 2. Do you think this kind of addresses your thoughts, Eric, or?
Yeah,
We
I
need to
mean,
be
to
more
some extent,
specific.
I just having been victim to several KPIs over the years, I just sort of have a intrinsic hesitancy to commit to, commit to like a arbitrary number when you don't really know the tools you're going to have ahead of time. I mean, I think putting some additional language in there to clarify it probably is sufficient.
Yeah, I no, I like that, right? Because maybe for year 1, right? I'm gonna make a note and I'll do some thinking on this and try and come up with some different scenarios. Should be a little bit more just broadly stated that we want to engage, enough organizations to measure the effectiveness of the, right? Because year 1 is really trying to be more of a proof of concept, right? We're working from a hypothetical. We have no idea if these are going to yield the results we want, right? So is having yeah, I don't know. I'm open to all sorts of anything that others want to share. Because I'm thinking about it, if we target 14 hospitals, right? So if phase 1 is 14 hospitals, right? So we reach out to Nate at UVM. Hey, dude, who provides you with water? Who does your wastewater? Who does your electricity? Who does your, diesel for your backup generators, right? Get the whole list of, critical infrastructure and essential supply chain. What if we don't have 20 organizations across the state that are serving the 14 hospitals that need to work at the tier 1? What if they're already at like tier 2 or better? And so, right, I'm thinking, does the hospitals quantify it enough for us in the strategic plan? And that however many map out at tier 1, 2, or 3 is going to be what it is, right? We shouldn't try and force organizations where they don't belong just to meet them. Like you said, a KPI that's, I don't want to weaponize it, right? And use it to, what do other folks think? Should we just not kind of back off it for year one?
We can't predict the term of the procurement cycle either.
No, you're right.
Should year one be something more along the lines? Is it too aggressive to think that you'll get that far with that many? Should it be more along the lines of establishing the relationships and the structure of the program and piloting with key participants or with a few participants, that type of thing? If you're feeling like that's too aggressive to do 20? I have no sense of what resources we'll have here. I'm not
Yeah, I
feeling
know,
like,
and I guess that's where I'm at, right? I'm with you, right? I don't know if it's 20 or 5 or 50,
Right.
right? I don't know what the right number is. So maybe it's not targeted numbers, but that we stated a little bit more vaguely, right? That we'll have at least enough organizations to go through it to be able to measure the value of the tier one services, right? That's what we want to do, right? Is really in the first phase is what we want to do is assess the value of these services
right.
before we start rolling them out even farther, right? It's like we
Yep.
need to make sure that what we're developing is going to has a market, has
Yep.
that it's going to. So that's maybe how.
And maybe in that, what some of the other activities is to actually measure and assess. So evaluate, measure, and assess.
Yeah, and that's along the lines of what I was going to add to what Sue said. But, leaving specific numbers out, I'm just as gun shy as Eric is on the KPIs and the putting those down in writing with something that we ultimately don't have control over. If hospital number 12 doesn't have time or resources to do this, then we're not getting that metric back.
Okay. So I'm thinking that it'll be a little bit more open-ended to say that, we will ensure that an adequate number of organizations will go through this program in order for us to understand, to measure the effectiveness of it so that we can determine what changes either need to be made or what. So, okay.
Yeah, I think that
That
works.
feels better right now where we're at. I mean,
Yep.
like I said, I still want to have something concrete to hold myself to, but we can't force, right? We're not going to be able to make organizations participate. So, okay. I will rework that. So ignore the 2010, 3, and 5, but I still will redo 4 to be a little bit more specific in driving what that template will at least have report parts to it. Any other questions or thoughts before we go to the next one? Of which we have 20 minutes left in our meeting. All right, moving along. The goals and objectives, we'll take that. So this is the strategies. If anybody has ever heard of the GHOST model, it's one that I've used often throughout my career, GOST. You define your goals and your objectives and your strategies and your tactics, right? You kind of start top and work down to flush things out. So it follows that model. The strategic plan doesn't include the tactical piece, right? That'll be what we start working on in the beginning of the calendar year 25. So program strategies. This is one that I've talked to, I think, most everyone about, right? You know, we've got a big push to make sure that we have outreach and awareness, right? We need to get in front of the critical infrastructure organizations so that they know these offerings are going to be available to them, and to make sure that they understand the why behind it. And you know, just I don't think this is something where we can play the if we build it they will come type, right? I think in many instances it's gonna have to be very targeted, right? The folks are gonna have to know that they play an important role, and that they should be at least have some basic cyber awareness. Strategy 2 is talking about the partnerships, right? Because there isn't any one organization within the state of Vermont that has the authority, the resources, the capacity, right, to work with all these entities to improve where they are, you know, their cyber readiness. So, you know, I spoke, you know, right to it about local colleges and universities around their work around tier 1 and 2. This will now include the VLCT. I should add that potentially.
It's in there.
Yeah, I've got them down more on just communications, right?
Well, partnerships.
But yes, yep. And then the Cyber Readiness Institute, which is the no cost like training and resource organization, national organization. Trying to determine things that will provide consistency, right? So that however somebody comes into the program, they can be assured that their experience will be the same as in other organizations, right? So adopting consistent materials, processes, CRI being a basis of that. Partnerships with, you know, Vermont-based organizations like the Guard, the League of Cities and Towns, Vermont Rural Water Association, and the Vermont Community Broadband Board. And then partnerships with Vermont-based technology companies with a cybersecurity focus to provide secure communication, sharing, and collaboration platforms, along with preparing professionals to respond to cybersecurity incidents. I feel like I need to also somehow add text that would imply the inclusion of managed service providers in that statement. But, yeah, no, it's 2 sentences, so I guess paragraph. What are folks' thoughts on the partnership piece? Am I missing people? Are you not comfortable with what's listed? Thoughts?
Would any of the local universities or schools have any interest in being part of that capacity building?
In what way? I like what you're asking, so I want to understand it better.
Well, it actually got triggered from a conversation from somebody who runs, I'm trying to think of who I was talking to now, but my brain's not thinking. But down at Norwich, they have a program, I guess, with that's out of Norwich, like the cadets and stuff, that could rebuild like hard drives for a place if they have issues. So the conversation in my mind is, you have a lot of these universities teaching how to be resilient in the cyber world. I don't know if they could help with setting up the delivery of the tier 1 and tier 2, or if they did internships or just some sort of partnership with the university, since they have a lot of people that are eager to make their name.
Yeah, we anticipate them being involved with the delivery, right, of tier 1 and tier 2. Actually being fundamentally involved, but had not envisioned what you just said about like, do they have capacity or could play a role in an incident response scenario? That's really intriguing, and I'm going to make a note of that. I have not talked to the universities about that, but I think that is something that is worth pursuing.
The only other piece to that I've come across, I guess, kind of as best practices around the country as we go to all these conferences, is Wisconsin has a program where they developed a 911 cyber response type program where they have a list of volunteers compiled in a database, and depending on what cyber emergency they're dealing with, they can dial a list of people and get all available people to respond as a volunteer 911 type response. And I thought that was kind of cool, and it's low cost, and it's just for people to build their own resume to get the training, and then you have like kind of a on deck circle for people that can respond.
Yeah, that's really good. I had I'm trying to remember, what's the Vermont one, the volunteer, right, for nurses and doctors and I think Department of Health manages it. My wife's signed up for it, but
Corps.
what's that?
MRC, Medical Reserve Corps.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I was like. At one point I was thinking the same thing, right? Is there and I think this is what you're getting to, Lieutenant Colonel, is that can we do something very similar with cyber professionals that would be part of a volunteer network? That's an interesting idea.
I know
It gets into there's some lot of things that have to be thought. What's that?
There's a national nonprofit run by, I think, Brigadier General Vic Macias out of U.S. Cyber Command that's trying to do something quite similar in his civilian capacity. He's a part-time guardsman. He's putting this nonprofit together to basically register folks with cyber skills to be available in case of significant events.
Interesting. Okay. I made some notes of those. I like that. Other comments on strategy 2 on the partnerships before we go to 3? All right. This is where we lay out the multiple tiers of support, depending on the maturity of your critical infrastructure organization, where tier 1 is planning and education, primary entry point. Think of it as remedial basics 101, however you want to think of it, but getting folks from doing nothing to having cyber an understanding and some basics. Tier 2 is risk management. This is like for those organizations that have completed tier 1, right? And now they need to do like somebody to help them come in and do a full-on risk assessment, right? Where are all their vulnerabilities? Help them prioritize their vulnerabilities, help them mitigate those vulnerabilities, help them go from being okay, now we know how much we need to be scared, to how can we reduce our fear because we can start plugging some of the holes type thing. And offering the resources to help them with that. And then tier 3 is organization or information sharing and collaboration network. A core piece of this is what we've been kind of loosely internally calling a Constellation SOC, Security Operations Center, constellation by which organizations voluntarily will share not their logs or anything into a common area, but hits different results of their monitoring to other organizations. Thoughts, feedback on the 3 tiers? Like I said, most of us, we've probably talked this through when we've met. Strategy 4, you can see that there's probably intermixing in some of these, my goals and objectives piece. So need to probably go back and look at that and make sure there's some clarity around it. This is the Universal Incident Response Plan template. And just kind of defines, you know, the Vermont specific resources, what obligations organizations would have in the event of a cyber event. That's interesting. I have no idea what's blocking that. The steps on how to engage key organizations, those types of things. I think based on the above feedback, I need to probably do a little bit more development on this. And then strategy 5, and this is really probably why it shouldn't be above, which is this is all leading to the idea that, you know, we have, by organically, we're building this community of organizations that are better cyber prepared. And outlining where, you know, it would be nice to see it get to something where the community is sharing communications channels, has some formal relationships, you know, meets routinely, those types of things.
I think this goes back to Sue's original comment on the use of the word ready. What determines ready, and whether or not we
Yeah.
want to look at it as being more of a maturity or an awareness, so a cyber aware community. Because it is an ever evolving.
Yeah. Yep. Thoughts? Questions, comments that we haven't already discussed through the above sections? And then last one is the talks, just briefly phased implementation. And, you know, the focus on organizations that support hospitals, and that this will likely, yes, it does support. And this is why I need to change it to at least state fiscal year 26, because this is likely going to be more like 18 to 24 months to get this work all completed. But that's a guess on my part, right? I tried to make it this so that when it goes over there and I'm pointing at the state house, that they don't all of a sudden want to write legislation that says we're obligated to do something for somebody else on a quicker path, right? Or that if we don't have something specific in here, then they're going to like tell us what to do. Thoughts?
You know the ecosystem better than I do, but is there any value to delivering something in a phase that's smaller in the year 1 versus waiting 18 to 24 months? And I really truly mean that as you know the ecosystem better than I do. I'm just
No, that's a really good question. And banner that around, and the answer I came up with was, well, yes, right. You know, we could look for 3 hospitals to volunteer, 4 hospitals or something like that, right? And maybe deliver something quite a bit quicker, and we could then, you know, measure the effectiveness of these programs, and are we doing everything right? My question was, how do we select those, and is there bias, or is it perceived, right, that we're favoring some hospitals over others? And I don't know how that would be. I don't know if that would be misconstrued, but maybe that's how we should pursue it. Is that you know, as a true proof of concept, we reach out to all the hospitals and we ask for like 4 volunteers or something, and we do that and see what comes back.
yeah. I wonder if it'll. Yeah, I mean, I think that in my mind, I think saying you're going to pilot something and measure it fast and adapt and come back with a fully baked plan is always more attractive. But again, you know the ecosystem better. I
Yeah.
agree. I'm not sure that do we really think the hospitals will be fighting to participate in this and disappointed if they don't make the first cut? And if that's the case, can we imagine a evaluation that doesn't appear as if it's favoritism, like one from each
Number-
region, so that it's,
Yeah.
it's crossing the sector of critical infrastructure providers, those types of things.
Oh, I like that, right? We could say one from the northeast, one from the northwest, southeast, southwest. The only reason I was concerned with a subset of the hospitals is because of the report that came out just a month ago, right? And they were talking about closing Gifford and some of the others, and I didn't know if like all of a sudden it's like, well, if we sign up for this, if we could get on this program, right, that's another thing to say that you can't close us. We're in the middle of this program,
Yep.
And maybe I'm like connecting way more dots than I should, and just be like, reach out to the hospitals in the different areas, and we just get, you're right, geographically dispersed, one from each of the four corners of the state, and that's what we go for like a proof of concept phase one. What other people think? Because I like that. I think it'll probably bring the cost down that we're going to estimate to do this, and it'll make it quicker to deliver some sort of measured progress, right? And a way to measure effectiveness. So, okay. We are almost at time. We're at 2:57. We got through the first run of the strategic plan. We have not touched the annual report. So I will ask everyone over the course of, well, it'd be great if you did it on your Thanksgiving holiday weekend, but I wouldn't expect that from you. Over the course of the next few weeks, I'll send out a reminder early December to get me comments about the strategic plan portion, so that I can have a little bit more of a refined document for folks to maybe review by the end of December, so that come the January meeting, it's more just ratifying it, instead of having to do more editing. So if everyone's willing to do that, I would appreciate it. Does anybody have any comments, questions, concerns for the group outside of the work we're doing today? Okay. Well, as we end our first year, thank you, everyone. I think there's been some good work done by the council. Progress made. I think we will have both a sound strategic plan and annual report for submission to the legislature, and I think this will give us a foundation to see what improvements we can make to benefit Vermonters starting next year. With that, I will need, what's that?
I said excellent.
Yeah, thank you. With that, I will need a motion to adjourn. A second also.
Second. Or, sorry, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, aye.
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 I
All those opposed, nay. Excellent. Why, thank you, everyone. I'm going to now stop recording.